104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports. Mike Vaccaro of the New York Post joining us right now. And Mike, the Yankees, it's still a fresh wound for me, but all in all, how do you see this season?
Well, it's got to be viewed favorably. It's got to be viewed as a success. I don't know that I necessarily bought into the whole little engine that could. I mean, it's still a $197 million team. Without a lot of very good players on it, but the thing that you have to be encouraged by is that the younger players, Aaron Judge, Luis Severino, came to the forefront and really kind of announced they're going to be a force to be reckoned with for a number of years to come. And there's so many other young players to come. And look, to get to Game 7 of the American League Championship Series, it's a bitter pill to swallow only because you only needed to win 1 out of 2 games and you didn't win either one to get to the World Series. But it's hard not to envision that there's going to be other opportunities for them to do that in the coming years. So, overall, it's got to be considered a big win for the Yanks this year.
Mike, let's talk about on the field first. We, did a segment the other day where I just off the cuff said I don't see Todd Frazier returning because I just don't see the role versus the money making sense for him. And the listeners went nuts. They want Frazier back in the worst way. Do you see any scenario in which he remains a Yankee?
I can see a scenario. I mean, a lot of that depends on if the Yankees are going to move other players. I mean, I think they'd have to move Castro and they'd have to move Chase Headley because Gleyber Torres, I know he's coming off an injury, but he's certainly a guy who's in their plans next year. And you're talking about just a glut of infielders. And the thing about Frazier, I mean, he's in free agency, and players, spend an awful lot of time, exert an awful lot of sweat equity to get to free agency to try and make, you're going to have a chance to make 1 or 2 scores in your career, and this is Frazier's opportunity. He's not coming off a great year, but he's certainly an attractive player for all the reasons that Yankee fans want him to stay here. But, he's not going to come here to work cheap, and he's not going to come he may give something of a hometown discount, but he's not going to give away the store. So I think that's going to be, part of the problem is the fact that, there will be other suitors for him, and he's going to have to make a decision if he wants to, if he wants to forfeit all of that he's earned to become a free agent to try and stay with the Yankees. And the Yankees, by the same token, you have to figure out if they want to make him a core player next year. It's, this all has to kind of take place, in a relatively quick period of time. So I understand the fans. I understand why he's a popular guy. He's a genuinely good guy. He's a local guy. He's a guy who clearly enjoyed being a Yankee and enjoyed this run, and that's the kind of thing that fans like. And the Yankees aren't insensitive to that kind of thing, but they also, they have a pretty large business model, and they want to try and stay under the luxury tax this year. So there's a lot of pieces that have to go into place before that happens.
Mike Vaccaro of the New York Post with us. How weird is it? I mean, you and I are probably around the same age. How weird is it to hear a Yankee team that's spending responsibly?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's part of it is because just the ways the laws of baseball, and part of it is it's a different generation of Steinbrenner, and I think it's in some ways it's a better generation of Steinbrenner, certainly a more responsible generation of Steinbrenner. I mean, George, the old man, was colorful, and certainly in his time and for what he was an important figure in New York baseball. But I think that Hal and this generation of people who are running the Yankees understand that there's a certain reality to baseball now, and it's increasingly difficult to win just by gobbling up free agents. I mean, even now, as great as this season was, you still have the evidence of what a bad contract can be like when you're talking about Jacoby Ellsbury and being on the hook with him for a couple more years. And although Chase Headley had a good year, I mean, he's a guy who also looked like he was kind of a dead money situation. So, there's a lot of lessons that have been learned about, baseball in 2017 and going forward is about young. You look at the Astros, you look at the Dodgers, you look at all the young players that they have, and they're not all young players, but I mean, certainly it's the engines of those teams are the Bellingers and are the Correas and the Altuves, and these are guys that get teams to where they want to be now, as opposed to buying up free agents. So it's an interesting strategy that the Yankees have embraced over the last couple of years, understanding they have to get younger, faster, quicker, and more cost efficient.
Mike Vaccaro of the New York Post with us, Levack Goz, 104.5 The Team. All right, so speaking of those contracts, there's one guy whose contract is up in CC. Everybody seems to want to keep him, and then you brought up Ellsbury. Can they move him? Is there anybody out there that's super interested in a guy who's overpaid and plays a better than average center field?
Well, it's going to have to be obviously a situation where the Yankees pick up a lot of that money. I think they'd be willing to do that. One of the things that the Yankees are still capable of doing better than any team in professional sports is paying for their mistakes. So if they can find somebody who's willing to take on, to take on at least a portion of the contract, and perhaps deliver something in return, I think they'd be able to. They'd certainly be willing to jump on that, because there's definitely a lot of outfielders, and Cliff Frazier's a guy, another young player who I think Yankee fans are excited about. And the only way you're going to be able to get in at bats is to kind of lessen the glut in the outfield. But it's as for CC Sabathia, certainly he had a kind of renaissance this year, which is it certainly would make the Yankees want to bring him back. What's really going to be interesting to see is if it's the kind of renaissance that impressed other teams also. Sometimes a guy like CC is a guy who you only appreciate really if you see him every fifth day and if you have him on your team. But what he was able to do was so tangible that you wonder if a team's going to be willing to offer him a 2-year, $30 million deal. I mean, the Braves were willing to offer Bartolo Colon last year a 2-year deal. So, right. And I think CC is certainly a higher class pitcher than that. So, I think the Yankees would be reluctant to go beyond 1 year, but I do think CC enjoys being here enough to where, say, a 1-year, $14 million contract could probably get that done.
Mike Vaccaro of the New York Post with us right now. So, Mike, the other big names aren't on the field. Brian Cashman, Joe Girardi not under contract. Will they be this time, March 28th when the season starts?
I don't think there's any question Brian Cashman's going to come back. He's every bit as integral a part of the Yankee brain trust in the front office as anybody, Steinbrenner, Randy Levine, anybody. He's trusted implicitly by the Steinbrenner family, and it's good because with the Yankees, for so many years had no stability in that job, and now you're talking about a guy who next year will be on his 20th year on the job, which is remarkable, given the Yankees' history with that job. So, and he's done a great job. Look, I mean, they did what's almost impossible to do, which is to stay relevant while rebuilding. And this year they reaped the benefits, the early stages of that rebuilding, and they still haven't gotten, most of the glut of that talent that they acquired last year. So he'll be back. I think Girardi will be back as soon as he wants to be back. I can't imagine the Yankees want to part ways with him. He's done some of his best work in years where the Yankees didn't make the playoffs. I mean, they've never bottomed out. When you look at what other teams have done on their way to rebuilding, the Cubs, the Astros, losing hundreds of games, and the Yankees never did that, and that's on Joe Girardi. And I think the question right now for Girardi is, does he want to take a step back and watch his kids grow up? That's certainly an option for him. He's made a lot of money with the Yankees. If he takes a couple of years off, the moment he announces he wants to get back in the game, he'll have 5 suitors. So, but you balance out the fact that this is a pretty intriguing couple of years coming up for the Yankees, and I think that as competitive as Joe Girardi is, that he'd want to be a part of that also. I'd be surprised if he's not the manager. I think the only thing that would preclude that from happening is if he decides that he wants to take a step back and focus on his personal life and his family over the next year or two. But it would surprise me if those two guys aren't in Tampa at the start of spring training.
Mike Vaccaro, New York Post with us, 104.5 The Team. You're home for Yankees baseball, but the Mets make the hire of Mickey Callaway. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely outside the box, and I give the Mets a lot of credit because I think that there was an assumption that Sandy Alderson was only going to hire somebody who he was familiar with, one of his guys, somebody that he knew fairly well, and it's pretty clear he didn't know Mickey Callaway. He couldn't have picked Mickey Callaway out of a lineup about 2 weeks ago. And yesterday he was introducing him as his manager. I give him credit for that. That's not to say that he's going to be a guaranteed success, but everything that we've learned about Mickey Callaway, and a lot of us had to learn on the fly because I think even those of us who knew he was the Indians pitching coach, that's pretty much all we knew. But clearly, what we've learned about him, he's a smart guy. He's a guy who's impressed every place he's ever been, and he's impressed everybody he's ever worked with. Terry Francona didn't know who he was before he interviewed him, and said 5 minutes into the interview he knew he wanted to work with him. And within a couple of years, he became as close to lieutenant as Terry's ever had. And Francona obviously is a guy who's a successful manager as there is. So it's not a bad pedigree to borrow from. I give him much credit. Look, you never know with these things. You know,
Right.
there are some managers that seem like no-brainers when you hire them. Some that make you scratch your head, and you just never know until you see what they do in the field. And you know, the real questions will come starting next April when he's deciding whether to pull a pitcher, whether to nuke his bullpen, whether to pinch hit for somebody. That's the time when you start learning about a manager.
Mike, it was a shock to me to find out that they still play the World Series if the Yankees aren't in it, I should say. What do you predict for this one?
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I really do. I mean, you know, all due respect to Yankees fans, I love this Astros team. It's a fun team to watch. The two horses at the start of the rotation, I think, given the opportunity, a puncher's chance to stay in it, Keuchel and Verlander. I could definitely see this series going the distance. I mean, the fact that Game 7 is at Dodger Stadium, I'd probably give the Dodgers the advantage in in either 6 or 7. I'm going to call it Dodgers in 7, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be hard to top last year, because last year was possibly one of the greatest World Series ever contested. But I think it's going to be a fun one, because you got some really interesting, fun players to watch, and that's really all you ask for in the World Series.
Mike Vaccaro, New York Post, man, we appreciate your time.
Anytime, guys. Good talking to you.